Alright everyone, it's time for a little bit of advice. If you don't want to be outdated or replaced, if you happen to be making a living, doing anything that involves self-branding, sort of self-marketing yourself, whether it's a skill or beliefs or, whatever it happens to be within the realm of human communication or more tangible maybe. Regardless, always side with the counterculture. Because look back through history and you'll see at least aspects of whatever a counterculture has talked about at the time are injected into public consciousness. They become accepted. Right now, for instance, what we see during this dying paradigm is that the old sort of legacy establishment, the old order of corporate neoliberalism is beginning to crash and burn. It's doing exactly what I predicted, which, back in 2016, which is it's begun to lash out quite viciously against all alternative aspects of life. It's the alt panic at this point. What it is normie America being told that alternative technology is a breeding ground for extremists. Alternative political ideologies are fringe and insane. Alternative explanations for what goes on in the world are tinfoil hat nuttery, invariably wrong. There's never any explanation given as to why it should be considered so, but it's how it works. And alt anything, the alt-right is basically the first boogeyman of this particular end paradigm. Most alt-righters are not actually going to go out and lynch people, but they've been branded that way. They've been branded based on a minority of them that would march through the streets maybe with hoods on or something. I would say you actually need to talk to people with that ideology. You can disagree with them all day, but to believe in deplatforming them and robbing them of their free speech and abandoning the First Amendment, I think that's more fringe than most of what much of the alt-right actually says, being, of course, myself a libertarian as opposed to an alt-righter. Another symptom of the alt-panic is that ideologies and groups get constantly mixed up, like people think that libertarianism is a far-right ideology. Okay, maybe on fiscal issues, yeah, a monarchist wants to cut your tax rate in half. That's, by the way, the worst thing that could possibly happen. Totally destroy the world. As opposed to maybe the establishment as it is, starting wars constantly. That's okay because it's normal. At least it's normal in the lunatic minds of people who haven't thoroughly thought about this situation. But I would say this, especially if you're self-branded, for instance. I'm a libertarian. It would be easy for me to play nice with the establishment, become like the corporate sponsorship friendly, like, yeah, I'm going to take ads and be sponsored, and I'm going to moderate what I say. I'm going to dress normally. I'm going to stop swearing so much. It would be easy. I'd probably have a higher income if I did that, because soon people would want to sponsor the material. But what the hell would be the point? Like, 5 years from now, you will be boring. You will be outdated. You can keep doing that, potentially, but eventually your audience will start to die off because you're not gaining anybody new. You're certainly not gaining younger people who are looking for more of a thrill than their older counterparts, generally speaking. That's a stereotype. It holds true statistically for the vast majority, not necessarily individuals. I realize I've had people, they say, well, yeah, I'm 75 and I watch your material sticks. Good. You're definitely, if you are a grandparent or whatever, you're one of the cool grandparents, I'm sure. And your that gave your grandkids like fucking Grand Theft Auto merchandise or something. And it must be pretty cool. Most people, though, are in that bracket are not like that. It's just like the average millennial is a neoliberal, but not all of us. I'm a millennial. I'm certainly not part of that movement. Gen Z is much more conservative, but you're going to find social justice warrior people in Gen Z. Look at the maybe the Parkland kids or something. You'll find them. They exist. People have to understand that. You have to think about statistical reality as well. You have to think about truth above everything else, and perception within human systems is part of that truth, or it stands in for it. The way in which people perceive the world matters. It's easy to sell out and say, well, the almighty dollar is calling, so, now I need to start putting on a fucking business suit to sit there in front of me. I need to have a professional studio and a business suit and a manager to handle sponsorship deals. And I can be the YouTube Jimmy Kimmel or something. Be talentless, essentially. As long as you play nice, people want to shake your hand and give you money. Once you're a maverick, though, you're actually exciting. Long term, you have greater success, potentially. The problem is people who start out that way, as they get more well-known, they start moderating their material. They go mainstream, essentially. You see, like YouTube. YouTube is essentially the millennials' edgy kids' paradise. Now it's becoming more like MTV, which is to say, eventually it will destroy itself. MTV, which was in a primordial sense the edgy place, essentially, for its era through the 80s and into, I would say, almost basically into the 2000s, I have to say. When they start partnering with other groups that are making relevant TV shows and broadcasts of various sorts, and they're still playing, of course, grunge and all the edgy music of the era, I would say. Now look at them. They're just one, fairly weak network. They're not really culturally relevant. The last time that they were edgy enough to cause controversy was over 10 years ago. You look at like MTV News on YouTube, I was, well behind them. Now I've flown past them in terms of audience. An entire network. This is the official channel of MTV News on YouTube. It's probably run by multiple individuals who have decent incomes in order to just manage a fucking YouTube channel and maybe a Facebook page. That's all they do. They have a group of nerds to manage all these pages. They have all the best equipment. And they hit all the right notes with the so-called modern movement of social justice warriordom, the very progressive, very wonderful vegan-style glasses without lenses in them mentality and pink hair. They hit all the right notes with that, and yet they're floundering. They're not really growing. There's a reason for that. A very, very good reason. Mainly because there's no talent there. It's not edgy, it's not exciting. Look, if you built a brand off being edgy, you gotta stay edgy. Sometimes that means you're gonna have to shift around your focus too. For instance, maybe 10 years ago, the religious aspect of my beliefs, that was what would have been considered more edgy. Like, my political views weren't as edgy at the time. They were sort of considered centrist. It's like Trump's views are considered centrist. Sort of the Ron Paul lowered the taxes mentality was just generally accepted. But socially, that aspect of my belief system, if I magnify it, I'm doing better at the time, because I can just talk about religion all day and how I oppose organized religion, and a bunch of religious people get mad. It's edgy content, at least to them. To the normie society of Evangelo-Con Bushdom, it's very edgy. March on to today, 10 years later, the political side of my beliefs all of a sudden is under fire as extremist. Now, it's not that my views have changed, it's just that something else about me is now considered edgy. That what was considered edgy before is now like, yeah, that's boring, and now something else is. So the other bit of advice is make sure that you choose your focus. And also play to your strengths, obviously, if you try to brand yourself. But side with the counterculture. Another aspect, this is something for the right and for the left, because they're both making the same dumbass mistake. Do not harass the youth. You can disagree with them all you want. You'll find that there are issues on which you agree with usually anybody within any part of the political spectrum. It's like guilt by association kicks in with some of these corporations, like a BuzzFeed or a Right Wing Watch. They'll say, well, you agreed with something that an alt-righter said, therefore you're like a Hitler enabler. Well, it could be that you're agreeing on like free speech or something like that. It has nothing to do with their core message of ethno-nationalism. Same would be true of a social justice warrior. If I'm talking about abortion, somebody might confuse me for one of those pink-haired people, but it's just one issue on which I happen to agree with them. You gotta you gotta focus on different things for different audiences as well. Some people don't care about all these issues. It's like, I know, I'm well aware when I upload occult content or something, a lot of people on this channel don't give a fuck about the occult. They're like, that's secondary for them. They may watch it, they probably don't. There are also people that are basically here to watch me make garden updates or open MREs or something like that. Diversifying your content is a good idea in order to get around some of the worst problems of political analysis that people experience today. Let's just say that I'm happy that the books that I write, 99% of them have nothing to do with politics. They're about like summoning demons or something like that. It's a good time. It's had by all. By the way, 150th edition now available. The Ars Paulina, I'll be updating that later. It's already on WordPress and Blogspot if you want to take the link early. But yeah, I always side with the counterculture because they'll win. What'll happen is that what is considered establishment now is it will become more and more boring and eventually get cast aside. Like I pointed out with my Satanic Panic video. And I've gone back to this topic like 10 times. It's very, very funny that 2 years on, finally, hey, look, here's some corroboration. A lot of people didn't really, it seems, believe me. about how bad the satanic panic really was. You have to have studied the topic in order to realize sort of why it overlaps with the alt panic that we're in now. You go back to these social panics, and you look at the claims that are made, or you look at the establishments at the time and any of their various beliefs, and 20, 30 years later, a lot of it has fallen totally out of favor. It's like the reality that was envisioned by someone in the Victorian era, we now see as fantasy. We could write a book about it, we would class it as fantasy, as fiction, as steampunk maybe. It wouldn't be considered nonfiction anymore. The reality, things that they thought were true, we now know to be false. 100 years on from now, a lot of what we think we know will be considered false too. It's just like when I was a little kid, it was held, you can't create elements. Well, you can. I mean, it's not efficient, but yeah, you can turn lead into gold if you put it through the Large Hadron Collider. Absolutely you can. You can also do shine it intense radiation at it, and it'll eventually convert if you under the right conditions, I believe. So that's a little bit more primitive, perhaps, and a little bit less efficient, I think, than even colliding particles together. But yeah, that's definitely a message for people. Side with the counterculture. That means siding with the youth. You don't have to agree with what everything they say. It's like if you look back at the hippie movement, and let us smoke our weed and drop acid. Yeah, that's good. People shouldn't be thrown in jail for having bad sex or something. Yeah, that's a good idea. Distrust government, like surveillance and war are bad. Yeah. But then at the same time, they're also saying, well, maybe Marx had it right. And no, that's where you draw the line. You're always going to find something you disagree with any movement on. Libertarian Party, I fundamentally agree with much of their platform. But they become an open borders, Sandersite sort of movement on the concept of nation states. I totally disagree with them on that. They also think still that Gary Johnson is more libertarian than Ron Paul. No, he's more partisan in the libertarian sense than Ron Paul. A little bit of a difference. So make sure that you don't just become a football team mentality cheerleader for some concocted ideology, because it's been artificially constructed in order to sort of fold you into itself, in order to gain money or power from you. That's how it works. It's propaganda. That's about all. Peace out.